Hello and welcome to our webinar today, OSHA Overview for Railroads. My name is Michelle Malsky. I'm the Manager of Safety Programs here at the Shoreline Safety Institute, and I will be your guide during today's presentation. Before we begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of our participants for attending our webinar today. We hope that you will enjoy our educational presentation that we have prepared. In case you would like to watch this presentation again or share it with your team in the future, this presentation will be recorded and we'll make the recording available at the conclusion of today's presentation. That will be located on our website, www.shortlinesafety.org. Just click on the Webinars tab and select the webinar you wish to view. To ensure quality audio during this presentation, we have placed all attendees on mute at this time. You will only be able to hear our presenters speaking. If you have any questions during or immediately after this presentation, you may use the questions bar located on the lower right-hand side of the webinar pop-up screen to type in your inquiries. We will reserve time at the end to answer any submitted questions. If you have any comments or questions after this presentation, you can feel free to reach out to me or the presenter as well, and the contact information will be listed on the very last slide. Now for today's webinar, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Ralph Weber is one of our safety culture assessment assessors with the Shoreline Safety Institute. Ralph Weber's railroad experience began with the DM and IR Railroad, now part of CN, as a tie gang member. His career included positions in operations, safety, and management. Weber has served as a member of the Governor's Railroad Safety Advisory Committee, has worked with a variety of railroad safety programs on both national and international levels, and has led employers to receive the safety awards on many local and national levels. Weber brings extensive hands-on experience with directing the development, implementation, and administration of policies with regard to FRA and OSHA safety standards, environmental issues at federal, state, and local levels, and development of programs related to risk management, safety management, and loss prevention. Weber holds a master's degree in industrial safety from the University of Minnesota Duluth. He is a certified safety professional, or CSP, and a qualified OSHA 1030 trainer. In his free time, he enjoys spending time with his family and also enjoys the outdoors. Our presenter is live with us now here today, and so I will turn it over to him to get us kicked off. Ralph, the show is yours.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and hello everybody, and I'd like to welcome all the participants to today's webinar, which is titled OSHA Overview for Railroads, an overview of the OSHA requirements and their application to railroads. This webinar will visit the issue of OSHA requirements and their application to railroads, property, and people. It's a topic that often gets overlooked because railroads are in the business of running trains safely, efficiently, and productively, and so the focus is on that aspect of the business, and rightfully so. But it also means that other parts of the operation can get overlooked. And among other things, we're going to be discussing that today. So we'll talk a little bit about what our various federal agencies have to say about the division of safety between FRA and OSHA, and then some about how OSHA works, their priorities. Then we'll take a look at a few photo examples of what to look for. I have lots of photos from my work as a safety director many years ago, and so I've picked a few of those from a while ago, and for today I've just picked a few. And then we'll end it up with steps you can take to stay in compliance. And then at the end of this, I'll take questions if there are any. Like Michelle said, I've been in the railroad operating and contracting industry all my career, and that's quite a while. As a stint as a safety director for a large maintenance machine company, I ended up learning a lot about on-track rules, and as a stint with a railroad contractor that builds track, I ended up becoming real familiar with OSHA and found that in industry, just the opposite of railroads, in industry the emphasis is on OSHA requirements and whatever tracks they might have in their industry, and sometimes it's a lot, tend to be an afterthought. And also one of the things I found is that industrial operations require their employees and any contractors, including those that are building tracks, they require them to be OSHA trained. which is a 10-hour, 2-day class on OSHA standards and their applications to the job site. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the OSHA side of the industry world here. And so what do our various government agencies, entities have to say about OSHA and the FRA? And how do they separate out responsibilities? In 2012, the two agencies got together and generated a memo of agreement delineating who regulates what, saying the FRA will regulate matters regarding railroad operations, such as movement on the rails, whether trains or track equipment, high rails, and they run under G-Corps or NORAC rules and probably a timetable. But that does leave out a large chunk of a railroad's operation. And I've yet to know of a railroad that doesn't have an office or a shop of some kind, along with welders, torches, electric and air operating equipment, and a myriad of hand and power tools that go with it. Not to mention office safety such as fire extinguishers and exit signs and other life safety standards. And that side of the operation falls to the OSHA side of regulatory coverage, and the FRA defers to OSHA for those non-track issues. I'm trying to move the slide to the next slide. There it is. Thank you. In November of 2016, after a few years, in 2016, the FRA again took notice of the OSHA side of regulation and issued a safety advisory to the railroads, reminding them that work outside the FRA scope may be OSHA regulated, and recommended a number of actions to meet those requirements. These are nothing particularly new in the safety world. I'm sure everybody's probably familiar with them, but for a quick overview, I developed a recognition program to identify and address safety hazards. This can be done through using a job safety analysis process or a job hazard analysis process, in which each step in a task is reviewed for hazards and then what steps are going to be taken to address the hazard. A lot of companies have written and documented JSAs, we'll call them, job safety analyses, for their routine and repeated tasks and have them in a 3-ring binder in a computer program for review. And that's good. That's good for day in and day out jobs, but as we all know, there are non-routine jobs that crop up, need to be addressed as well. And maybe even more importantly, it's critical to address those than the standard tasks. And that means taking a moment to give a job a once-over using a blank JSA before starting. Doesn't mean conducting a 45-minute dissertation, but it does mean to take the time to know what you're getting into before you're getting into it. And of course, provide training on the use of those strategies. So once you've got that nice work done of JSAs, JHAs, you have the perfect source of training material, and especially for new hires and employees new to some task. It's important to provide training to all employees so they know not only how to do the job, but what those hazards are. And that can be done through providing training, of course. And institute procedures for OSHA compliant job safety briefings. OSHA compliant is a scary word, but all it really means is job safety briefings need to gather your workers together, reviewing the plan for the job and the hazards faced. And of course, job safety briefings are required by both OSHA and the FRA, and everybody should already actually be aware of that and doing them. And develop and implement good faith challenge procedures. These are mandated by both OSHA and the FRA, and I'm going to say don't need any initial discussion on those topics. So, like I said before, what I've been talking about is basic stuff, really shouldn't be new to anybody, and it's actually a set of minimums to be met. And what I think about each of these could be, when I think about it, each of these could be expanded to its own webinar topic. All right, and then the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB. earlier this year, January 2018, they sent a memo and decided to weigh in on the topic as well, sent a memo to the FRA recommending they take a firmer stance on OSHA regulations applicability to the railroad. Now, although I'm going to paraphrase here, they don't like the word may apply. OSHA regulations may apply to railroad property and would like to see the word do apply. Although really what they ultimately want is for railroads to know about OSHA and where its standards apply. And so pretty much everybody governmentally is involved in the act, and I think we can say without much reservation that OSHA does have application to some of the railroad property, and we need to pay attention to their standards as well. Railroads and OSHA, question mark. Well, why should you pay attention? Citations are expensive. They can range from $7,000 to $70,000 each citation, depending on severity, although depending on special situations can get into 6 digits and beyond, and that is a lot of money. And yes, there is the authority to call for jail time in particularly egregious situations. As for publicity, OSHA fines and citations often make the news, and they get a black mark and could maybe even lose customers because of it. That black mark also hangs with your company for many years and can be found by anybody who wants to research for it. And it becomes just another negative that gets added on if something else happens to warrant a reporter or somebody to do some research on a company. Citation types. So there is a federal OSHA, and some states have taken over that role, and there is a state OSHA, and in a few locations there's even more than that, a county and local OSHA as well. So with all of that said, some of their standards are more stringent, or actually they have to be more stringent than the feds and the states, and the inspectors can be objective. And so in the big picture, it's really difficult to select individual examples of violations. But OSHA definitions are, other than serious, is a violation that would not usually cause death or serious injury, but is nevertheless related to job safety or employee health. The maximum penalty for a other than serious violation is $7,000 each. And inspectors in this situation can choose how much, if any, to assess based on any number of factors. Serious violations. This is when an employer knows of or should have known of a situation that has a definite chance of causing injury or death, but does not remedy it. Then it is defined as serious. Inspectors have to assess a penalty up to $7,000, but once again, that can be adjusted based on a number of factors. Willful violations are the most serious of all of them. It's reserved for intentional violations of OSHA rules or situations that show disregard for employee health and safety. Minimum penalty is $5,000. Maximum is $70,000. Although if there's a fatality involved, it can also become a criminal penalty, a civil penalty, with a minimum of $250,000 for an individual and $500,000 for a corporation. And like I said before, if it's an individual, there can also be a 6-month imprisonment involved. A repeated violation. If an employer is cited for a particular violation and a subsequent inspection finds an identical or similar, a repeat violation can be levied with a maximum fine again of $70,000. And a failure to abate. If an employer receives a citation and a date by which it must be remedied, but then doesn't do it, the fine becomes $7,000 a day. So these are the various OSHA citation types. And for all of these, there is, as I said before, a fair amount of latitude involved depending on good faith, company size, and previous history of a company. So what will bring OSHA to a property? And they do come without warning or prior notification. You don't know they're arriving until the moment they arrive and knock on your door. First up is imminent danger. If an OSHA person is driving along, sees someone on top of a building without fall protection, they will stop and visit. Or sees someone in a trench without cave-in protection, they will stop. Or if someone should call in and report something along those extremely serious lines, they will go there promptly. If there is a fatality or a serious accident, we'll call that a multiple injury or an amputation or something along those lines. That will quickly bring them about. An employee complaint, should someone call with a complaint about a safety issue, that will bring them. Program inspections. Different industries get visits once per year or once every 2 years or once every 3 years, depending on the type of industry and the risks involved. And the follow-up is just that. They came to see you, and now they come back to assure that anything previously cited has been managed. 5 most cited OSHA standards. Fall protection. This isn't a one-size-fits-all standard. If you are a manufacturing factory facility indoors, for example, and you have vats or you have walkways, it's a 4-foot protection standard. If you are a construction site out building buildings, there is a 6-foot standard for fall protection. And per the FRA, a railroad bridge has actually a 12-foot limit before fall protection is required. And so, since we're talking about OSHA and buildings of property here, if you have a building, you need to look to the 4-foot standard. Hazard communications. This needs to be a documented program that identifies the chemicals that are on and used on the property. And then you need to get safety data sheets for those chemicals and provide annual training to the employees about the hazards of those chemicals. This is a documented program that will be looked for. Scaffolding. This is a complex issue, probably isn't a big deal for railroads. Let's just say you need to know what you're doing or hire someone who does if you're going to work with scaffolding. Respiratory protection. For respiratory protection, odds are that buying a dust mask from your local hardware store won't meet the need. You need to know what people are being exposed to and at what level in order to determine what's needed. Whether it's a dust mask or an N90 level respirator or a half mask or a full face mask or maybe a powered air purifier. And if you go beyond that, you're getting into some pretty serious chemical hazards. Control of energy, hazardous energy, lockout, tagout. This also is a wide-ranging issue and one I define as zero energy state. Don't trust things held suspended by hydraulics or air or electrics. Pin them, chain them, block them, or put them at rest and shut them off and lock out any startup ability. And if it's electric, shut off the breaker and lock it and tag it out. In fact, OSHA has requirements that certain lockout tagout procedures for certain machinery have to be documented and in the vicinity of whatever machinery you're working with. In the railroad world, the equivalent concept is putting your personal lock on a track switch that accesses a stub track that you're working on. That locks it out so nothing can come in on top of you. And so it's the same kind of concept in the railroad world for that sort of thing. What do you do if OSHA knocks on your door? First thing, check credentials. He or she will have an identification card, maybe even a badge. They will sit down with you. They will then sit down with you, let you know what brought them there in a pre-inspection opening conference. And then you go for a walk. If there's an employee complaint or imminent danger, that's where they will want to go and are only authorized to go there. And unless they see a serious safety issue en route, won't address anything else. It's possible in an inspection they'll want to do a wall-to-wall inspection. And if that's so, it's going to be a long day for you. And they will want to walk every inch of your property. And regardless of what brought them there, you need to walk step by step with them, shoot pictures of anything they shoot pictures of, and take notes of anything they comment on. Then they'll want to see training documents, including HAZCOM, of course, as we've talked about. And remember not to get overly friendly. Provide only what's asked for and don't overshare information. Then they will conduct a closing conference, tell you what they found, and have a discussion on how to abate what they found and how long that should take. Then they will leave, and after a few weeks, you'll get a certified letter outlining the citations that you discussed and any fines, if there are any. Then, of course, you can decide if you want to contest any of these citations, which you can do if you want. So I spoke a little while ago about photos and things to look for. Remembering these are photos from a long time ago that I've just kind of accumulated over the years. I've got a bunch of them, but we're just going to look at a few of them. So here's a picture of a hand grinder, which is obviously unguarded. And secondly, depending on the tool, it may need a plug with a ground prong. Of course, these tools are common and found in every maintenance shop in the country. And so you see these tools all the time. Something else, unsecured oxygen and fuel gas bottles. Out in the yard, here we see an oxygen and an acetylene tank sitting in the middle of nowhere, actually. They are unguarded, they are unsecured, and by tire tracks in the road, you can see people have been driving by them. And these kinds of things, oxygen and acetylene tanks always need to be secured, and when stored, they need to be separated by a 4-foot metal barrier or separated by 20 feet, which obviously isn't the situation in this picture. Missing fire extinguishers. Here's a picture of a missing fire extinguisher, which should be obvious to anybody walking by and quickly remedied. And this, in fact, would be a violation of FRA for track machinery as well, and would be a violation in a facility, a building, a violation of a life safety code. Electrical issues. Here is a picture of an extension cord that's badly chewed up and should have been tossed long ago. In fact, electrical cords and extension cord problems seem to crop up quite often. They seem to be used as permanent wiring, and they seem to be the kind of thing that lays on the floor and gets driven over quite often. And so you really need to pay attention to extension cords to make sure they're not chewed up like this one, and particularly where the insulation meets the plug ends. You can see it's pulled away. That needs to be either fixed or tossed, one or the other, as far as how to deal with this kind of a deal. Braided and cut lifting straps. Lifting straps are used on every property and get heavily used for that matter. And when they show signs of wear and tear, like the abrasions you see here and a cut on the edge of one of them, when they show signs of wear and tear, they need to be cut up, not just thrown away, but they need to be cut up and tossed. And you can see in the picture here where these been abraded and cut and need to be discarded. And so those are just a few examples I picked out of several things that you can take a look for. And so we've been talking about OSHA and the FRA and the big sticks and clout that they wield, but safety isn't all about them because they're minimum standards anyway. What it's all about is keeping employees safe in the first place and how you go about doing that. So you have to put together, or not have, you should put together a program that eliminates hazards in the first place. And as we talked before, a good start on that is having a JSA, Job Safety Analysis, or a JHA, same thing, Job Hazardous Analysis program in place that looks at your tasks and addresses those tasks and the hazards being faced, and then how to abate those hazards so they don't cause a problem. And then you need to give people, your workers, the information to know those hazards and how they face them and how to deal with them. And then have a safety program that encourages and expects workers to work safely. good way to do that is to conduct effective job safety briefings with full participation of all involved, and getting the executives involved whenever you can. Which leads to the next, no, I didn't know that slide was coming in. Thank you, Michelle, for putting that into me. I appreciate that. Here's an example of a job hazard analysis that you can go through, and it has the steps and work activities, potential hazards and control measures, various protective equipment that's required and involved, yes or no. And this actually works very, very well to go through each one of your jobs and highlight this. In fact, the best thing to do is have the people that are actually doing the work write these out, because they're the people that are in the best situation to know what the hazards are. Your experienced employees are some of the best for this sort of thing. So there's a good example of JHA. So that leads us to the next slide. This is the SLSI, Short Line Safety Institute, 10 core elements slide that give you an example of a strong safety culture. I'm not going to review all of them. It would take too long, but I will touch on element number 1 for just a moment. And it is number 1 for a reason, and been proven over and over, that executive leadership sets the safety example by what they say, but more importantly, by what they do. They not only have to follow safety rules themselves, but they have to make decisions, whether financial or operational, that place priority on safety. Employees see that, and it sets the example for everybody and sets the culture for everybody, and the importance of this just cannot be overstated. And that by itself will go a long ways towards number 5 in creating a safety conscious environment. And of course, safety training, and that's highlighted in number 10, bolded there. The safety training and resources are available to support safety. And as I said, you need to know what the hazards are before being faced and how to deal with those hazards. And that's what training is all about. Finding the hazards and either getting rid of them or teaching people how to avoid those hazards and how to deal with them so they don't get hurt. And so, with all that said, the question is, what's the probability of OSHA showing up on your doorstep? I'm going to say that it's unlikely unless there's an injury serious enough to bring them in or an imminent danger situation comes to their attention. But that doesn't mean their standards and regulations should be not paid attention to. They still have application to parts of railroad property and need to be addressed where necessary. In the end, both agencies are working with industry really to achieve the same thing, and that's safety across all industry lines. And that brings me to the end of our webinar, and I appreciate everybody's listening, and if you have any questions, please let me know. And as Michelle said earlier, if you want to contact me, there is the email address on your slides. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Ralph. So we will wait for a few questions to come in here. This is your opportunity to ask Ralph Weber any questions you may have that concern OSHA or the topics covered here today. So if you do have any questions for Ralph, you have on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar platform, you can type in some questions there and we'll read them as they are submitted. And as some more questions filter in, a popular one that we usually get is, will this be available after this presentation? And of course, this will be recorded and it will be posted up on our website shortly after we conclude here today. So Ralph, we do have one question that came in, and what would be an example of an egregious violation that would be one of the more expensive citations?
An example of egregious is let's see, how would that work? If you required an employee to go into a situation which you knew was hazardous, let's say confined space. You knew confined space was a dangerous situation and there was the opportunity for the atmosphere in that confined space to cause a problem, a fatality, yet you required that person to go in there to that confined space anyway, and they did, and a fatality happens, that would certainly be an egregious situation, and you would be culpable for requiring that to happen.
Great, thank you, Ralph. Let's see, we have two questions here, and we'll answer those here in the order in which they came. Okay, so the first question we got here, is there a comprehensive list of OSHA programs that are not preempted by FRA/PHMSA regulations?
No, there is nothing written along those lines. No, there's not a preemptive list that I'm aware of anyway.
All right, thank you, Ralph. We have another question in here. Can you repeat what is an example? We're getting some more as they filter in here. Will you repeat what an example of a willful type citation by an individual? So let me say that again. Can you repeat what is an example of a willful type citation by an individual?
An example of a well, once again, a willful. These are the most serious, and it's an intentional violation of an OSHA rule or situation in which you show disregard, total disregard for employee health and safety. Once again, it's a situation where you knew it was unsafe, and yet you required somebody to go and perform that job, or you knew the situation was unsafe and you did nothing about it, and somebody goes and performs that task anyway. Even though you knew it was unsafe, you allowed it to happen. That would be a willful violation.
Alrighty. Our next question we have for you, Ralph, is does ASRA or the Shortline Safety Institute have a generic program for things like the hazardous communication or lockout tagout? And before you start, I just wanted to pop in what Ralph had on his screen earlier with the example of the JHS, the job hazard checklist that we saw previously. That will be available on our website. So you'll be able to take that template and use it for your railroad. Like Ralph had said, and feel free to jump in any time, Ralph, maybe the best course of action would also be to have that specific job also help you out fill that checklist out. Ralph, you want to add anything to that?
No, you've covered it pretty well. The JHAs are an absolutely great method of determining how to do a job and how to do it safely. And so using that template works very, very well.
And as far as the other parts, the hazardous communication and lockout tagout, those are great suggestions, and we will take that under advisement and hopefully create something there for you and get back to you as soon as we can. All right, so our next question here is, what is OSHA's jurisdiction regarding cranes mounted on track cars? There's a couple parts of this. That one first.
Okay, well, OSHA, FRA retains regulation or retains anything that's on track. It's separated out by movement on track, on railroad property versus not on track, such as shops, offices, and that sort of thing. So FRA keeps their bit of it and OSHA has their bit of it. I think that answers the question, I think.
Okay, there's another part of that question. Will preemptively certifying employees/operators under OSHA regs be viewed favorably before OSHA comes on site?
Absolutely. Yes. The answer to that is yes.
That was easy.
Yeah. I like easy questions.
The next one we have is, we operate railcar repair shops not owned by the railroads. We can't seem to find many FRA regulations that directly apply. Do you know of FRA regulations, or are we completely subject to OSHA regulations in this situation?
In a car shop, excluding the movement of the cars in and out, the car shop itself, the buildings and the tools used to repair the cars would come under OSHA jurisdiction, as well as the building itself. Moving the cars in and out would be a railroad move. So I guess you would have both in the same situation. depending on what your task is.
All right, and if you need to get some more details about that, again, Ralph Weber's email address is listed there, or you can reach out to me as well, and we'll make sure the right connections are made. The last question that we have here for today is, would OSHA's bloodborne pathogen requirement apply to train crews?
That's a very good one. I'm going to say yes, OSHA's bloodborne pathogen would apply to actually all employees, whether you're a trainman or whether you're a trackman or whatever your task is. Yes, OSHA's bloodborne pathogen would apply.
All right, and we got one more that sneaked in here, and that is, are track and bridge inspectors performing job duties while on track regulated by both OSHA and FRA?
If they are on track, it's FRA regulated.
Gotcha. All right, well, that will do it for today. Again, thank you, Ralph, for being with us, and thank you to everyone that participated in today's presentation. We'll make this presentation available shortly on our website. If you need any further information from Ralph or myself, feel free to contact us. And stay tuned for more webinars coming from the Short-Line Safety Institute. We'll have one in May that's actually going to retire our Look Away Safety Culture Training example. And if you didn't see it at any of the ASLRA regional events or other trainings that we've attended, then this is your chance, and we hope that we will see you at the end of May. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and we will talk to you soon. Make it a safe day.
Thank you.